Hello, and welcome to Day by Day True Crime Stories, the podcast where we explore a different crime or justice milestone from this day in history. I'm your host, Kona Gallagher, and today is October 23rd. On this day in 2019, it was almost midnight when 19-year-old Aniah Blanchard pulled into a Chevron station off of South College Street in Auburn, Alabama. She was on her way home after visiting a friend. It was just another ordinary night in a college town that would within hours become the center of a statewide manhunt. Today, we're talking about the disappearance and murder of college student Aniah Blanchard. Let's get started. Aniah was the kind of young woman who drew people in. She was a Southern Union college student studying early childhood education and a bright, funny, fiercely loyal friend who FaceTimed her family daily. She was also the stepdaughter of UFC heavyweight fighter Walt Harris, who often said that she was his heart. That night, Aniah texted her roommate that she was, quote, almost home. It would be the last message she ever sent. Inside the Chevron's grainy surveillance footage, Aniah grabbed a late-night snack with her black 2017 Honda CR-V parked just outside. But she wasn't alone. In the footage, you can see another customer enter the frame, a tall man in a dark hoodie, later identified as 29-year-old Ibrahim Yazeed. The camera shows him glancing toward Aniah, just enough to be noticed later by detectives who would replay the tape over and over again. Minutes later, Aniah left the store and walked back to her SUV. What happened next would only be reconstructed later through witness statements and forensic evidence. A man standing outside said he saw Yazeed force her into the car and drive off. But he didn't call the police right away, something that he said he will regret for the rest of his life. By morning, Aniah's friends and family were texting, calling, and checking in with anyone who may know where she was. When her phone went straight to voicemail and her car didn't show up at her apartment complex, panic set in. Her family reported her missing that afternoon, and Auburn police immediately issued an alert. Within 48 hours, a major investigation was underway. On October 25th, officers found her black CR-V abandoned in the parking lot of a Montgomery apartment complex, more than 50 miles from where she was last seen. The passenger side was damaged. Inside, detectives saw what they would later describe as signs of a struggle and blood that appeared to indicate, quote, a life-threatening injury. The search for Aniah stretched across counties and agencies: Auburn Police, Montgomery Police, the Alabama Law Enforcement Agency, and the FBI. Volunteers fanned out through wooded areas, ditches, and highway shoulders. Billboards went up. A $105,000 reward was announced. Auburn's mayor urged the public to stay vigilant, calling the case, quote, a community emergency, end quote. Back at the forensic lab, testing confirmed what everyone feared. The blood in the SUV matched Aniah's DNA. The case shifted from missing person to abduction. Detectives pored over the Chevron footage again, identifying the man near her, Yazeed, a Montgomery resident with a violent history. Court records revealed that he'd been out on bond for charges including kidnapping, robbery, and attempted murder. That fact hit the state like a shockwave. The man now suspected in the disappearance of a young college student had already been accused of holding another man at gunpoint, nearly beating him to death, and he had still been granted bond. For many Alabamians, it was infuriating and unacceptable. By early November, police had the evidence they needed to move in. They obtained a warrant for Ibrahim Yazeed's arrest on first-degree kidnapping charges, and he fled. A week later, just after midnight on November 8th, U.S. Marshals and Florida deputies found him holed up at a motel in Escambia County. When they entered the room, he tried to run, but officers tackled and arrested him. He was extradited to Alabama in shackles, booked into the Lee County Jail, and charged with the kidnapping of Aniah Blanchard. For Aniah's parents, it was both a relief and a torment. They knew who had taken her, but they still didn't know where she was. Search teams pressed on, focusing on back roads between Auburn and Montgomery. Over the next 3 weeks, volunteers and police scoured dense woods and rural farmland, tracing leads and rechecking old tips. Then, on November 25th, 2019, everything stopped. That morning, search teams in Macon County found human remains in a wooded area off of County Road 2 near the small town of Shorter, roughly 20 miles from where Aniah's SUV had been discovered. Within days, the Alabama Department of Forensic Sciences confirmed that the remains were hers. The medical examiner ruled her death a homicide. The cause was a gunshot wound. News of the discovery broke just before Thanksgiving. A memorial formed outside of Southern Union College with a line of candles, sunflowers, and handwritten notes. On social media, Walt Harris shared a photo of his daughter smiling, captioned simply, "My baby girl." Court filings soon revealed chilling new details. Prosecutors alleged that Yazeed had told someone he shot a girl after she, quote, went for the gun. They said that the killing happened during a robbery, that Yazeed had taken Aniah's car and phone after abducting her, and that he shot her while she was still inside of the vehicle. Those elements, murder during a kidnapping and robbery, made the case a capital offense, eligible for the death penalty. 2 other men were eventually charged as well. Antoine Squirmy Fisher, who was accused of helping dispose of evidence, and David Lee Johnson Jr., who was charged with hindering prosecution. Prosecutors later dropped Fisher's charge, saying that the evidence didn't support accomplice liability. Johnson's case was handled separately. For investigators, the state's narrative was built around 4 anchors: the Chevron surveillance footage, showing both Aniah and Yazeed, the eyewitness who saw her forced into the SUV, the blood and bullet evidence from inside the car, and finally, the recovery of her remains near Shorter. Together, those elements built the framework for what happened that night. But even as the case moved through court, the outrage over Yazeed's pretrial release reshaped Alabama law. Aniah's family, who was grieving but determined, began working with state lawmakers to close the loophole that had allowed a violent offender to walk free. The result was Aniah's Law, a constitutional amendment allowing judges to deny bail to defendants accused of serious violent crimes like kidnapping, sexual assault, and attempted murder. The bill sailed through the legislature, and in November 2022, Alabama voters approved it by a wide margin. But the victory was bittersweet. It couldn't bring Aniah back, but it could help prevent another family from suffering the same fate. In the years since, the legal process has dragged on. In November 2022, a Macon County grand jury indicted Yazeed on 3 counts of capital murder: murder during kidnapping, during robbery, and involving a victim in a vehicle. He pleaded not guilty and remains in custody without bond. Prosecutors have confirmed that they will seek the death penalty. As of the most recent court schedule, his trial is set for March 2026. Through it all, Aniah's parents, Elijah and Angela, and her stepfather, Walt Harris, have continued to speak publicly about their daughter. They've described her as bright, compassionate, fiercely protective of her friends, and the kind of person who made you feel seen. In interviews, they've said that what hurts the most is knowing how terrified she must have been in those last moments. Aniah's legacy now lives on in the law that bears her name and in a foundation created by her family to support victims and advocate for reform. It also lives in a single enduring truth. Aniah was loved deeply, fiercely, endlessly, and that love has never stopped fighting for her. As her mother told reporters, quote, "My baby mattered, her life mattered, and I want her legacy to mean change," end quote. Aniah Blanchard's story changed Alabama law. It changed the way the state handles violent offenders, and it reminded all of us that even when a single night takes everything, a family's love can still move mountains. Thank you for joining me on today's episode of Day by Day True Crime Stories. If you found Aniah's story compelling, please subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. It'll help us grow. And be sure to join us again tomorrow as we explore another significant event in true crime history. Until then, stay safe and remember that behind every headline is a life worth remembering. Day by Day True Crime Stories is a Little Monster production.
Hey, you can do it!